And it's a story that's not that far away in some far away place, because it's a story that can happen just about anywhere.
So this past summer in Cape Cod, there was an astonishing, kind of unbelievable event. In fact, I'm not sure I believe it. But a lobster fisherman named Josiah Mayo was, just looking for lobster, and suddenly was swallowed up by a humpback whale. He thought it was a white shark, but it was a humpback whale. And he fell, I don't know how many of you read about this. Yeah, astonishing. It made me look at the book of Jonah with completely new eyes. It's like, oh, this really happened. And he was in there for, I think, 30 seconds. I was listening to his interview on Jimmy Kimmel. It wasn't 3 days like Jonah. And he felt like there was he was on this water ride, and suddenly he was spit out. And thank God there was another fisherman, his friend, there with him, and he was rushed to the hospital. So that's the story insofar as I understand it. What do you think about this, Rabbi? How does this make you look at the book of Jonah? Like, the whole Torah now is true, right?
All you need is one piece of evidence, that's it, and that's...
But if that could happen, maybe the sea could split.
Well, I think maybe it's as hard to imagine forgiving people as it is to imagine being swallowed up by a crazy big fish.
Yeah.
Or whale.
Yeah, and Jonah could not imagine forgiving the people of Nineveh. He didn't want them to be forgiven. Astonishing, right? You'd think all we want is forgiveness, but no, he ran in the other direction.
So his running in the other direction is what we read on Yom Kippur. As we come to the end of the day, at the end of all of this introspection, all these moments of confession, moments of thinking and reflection, and so we're reading about someone who has he didn't know it then, but he has the Jonah complex.
He's got a forgiveness problem.
He's got a forgiveness problem. What's remarkable to me each year when we read this is I find myself throughout the chapters of the book of Jonah identifying with different moments. I get Jonah, he's really a remarkably complicated character. he doesn't believe that even if the people were to make amends and do tshuva, that it's worth it. He's assaulted by it. He's angry about it.
Not only that, he wants to commit suicide. At the end of the book, he wants to kill himself. Right? It's not exactly about the forgiveness. It's about the kikayon, dying. So God plants this tree for him. And just one note about that is, his name is Jonah ben Amittai. He's Jonah, the son of truth. So he wants sort of pure truth, nothing in the way of truth, right? He wants crimes to be punished and sin not to be remitted, right? He just wants it, he wants the world to be very clear. But then suddenly, this kikayon at the end of the book, when Jonah's so unhappy and distressed about the forgiveness, God raises up this tree that gives him shade. And what it says, it's really interesting, I just noticed this today, is that the tree relieves him from his own ra, me'ra'ato. And I think his ra is having the sunlight or the light of truth, just completely without any relief, without shade. So he has the shade for a little while, and he loves it, right? It's beautiful. And then God somehow makes that tree die, and he's so unhappy. And I think that's the moment he wants to die.
He wants to die because I'm asking.
Oh, you're asking me. I'm waiting for the answer. Okay, let's look at this for a second. So on page 367, oh no, it's before the tree. I'm sorry, I completely had it wrong. So he's unhappy about the forgiveness. He's unhappy about what happened in Nineveh. The people made tshuva, and God forgave them, and now they're not going to be wiped off the face of this earth. And and Jonah wants to die. He says, Ki tov moti mechayai, in verse 3, right? Better to die than to live. And then God makes him the tree. And then he's grieving for that tree. He's grieving for that beautiful tree that gave him a little relief from the sunlight.
I can appreciate someone who feels as though it's too easy to say you're sorry. I can appreciate somebody who says, like, it's so great that you all put on sackcloth and ash. I mean, on some level, I appreciate that. On another level, I think to myself, in terms of our own society, our own culture, our own communities, and it's just hard to imagine the kind of tshuva that we need to do as a collective. And if somebody were to walk up to us and say, you know what, don't tell me you can't do it anymore. Don't tell me that the things that you say are impossible because we did the impossible 18 months ago. Right? 18 months ago, we would never have imagined that within a couple of weeks we would shut down the entire world in order to keep people safe. That would never have been plausible. Would have been possible. We thought, oh, you're crazy, you can't do it. So here I can imagine someone saying, you know what, I don't want any excuses. I want to see a world where people do tshuva, and if they do tshuva and they change their ways, there's a national day of reckoning here in America, a world day of reckoning about the ways that we do and don't do that actually affects the entire global community. I would be, again, Jonah wants to see justice served, and I would be very thrilled if that were to happen, meaning I would be thrilled that people did tshuva. I'm kind of like, in the beginning I get Jonah, I'm like, okay, no. And then wait a second, this is amazing. This entire city, stops, and they do tshuva, they repent, they say they're sorry, they go through all the motions. And so by the time we come to the end of this, Jonah, who of course is the dove, the peaceful one, whose name means, right? Yonah. It's like an image from, right? The Yonah is the one that tells Noah in the flood story that it's safe to come out now, right? Comes back with an olive branch.
But is he the peaceful one? Like, that name doesn't totally make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense.
Right, and it's at odds with the Son of Truth part. Like the peaceful judge. Like, peace needs for truth to be a little bit subdued. No, you can't really have peace when you say, and this is what I was talking about this morning, I know the truth, right? You're wrong. You can't have peace then. A friend of mine recently said the 3 sweetest words in the English language. What do you think they are? You were right. You were right. It's amazing to hear that, right? To lay down your weapons and just say, Rabbi Ingber, you were right.
What if everybody did that? Come on, what a world that would be.
That's what tshuva means at Romamu.
So Jonah has to learn his lesson. Jonah has to actually get to a place where he's taken out of his own natural pattern. Like, he has to become, right, the peaceful one. Yeah. He has to learn to compromise. He has to learn to recognize that that in some way God's project here, like Brian Stevenson would say, is not to find people at their lowest moment in their worst place and then judge them in there, but to give people the chance to transform. He has to learn to believe in humanity again, and trust that people can change and that it's not just on the surface.
Yeah, maybe who he really is Jonah. He's really the dove. But somehow the truth moved in, that hardened sense of truth as a defense, right? And he has to go back to his original nature. And that's his tshuva.
I feel that very beautifully, that sometimes people who are the most sensitive, obviously, the ones who live their lives with such an openness, a vulnerability, it's so hard sometimes for them to regain trust with the world because they've been so hurt. They're so exposed in a way. And so Jonah has to learn to trust again. And he's there, it's kind of an amazing image of him being exposed. Like, he had to be exposed again when God took away the kikayon, for God to then say to him, you're exposed, you're very sensitive, right? I want you to regain your sensitivity for these humans. That's the way I feel, God says, for each human being. I don't know about you, I sometimes walk around in New York City, and it hits me, and I know maybe this is just me, and again, very confessional, we're in a church. But I sometimes will just be walking by other human beings, and no matter who it is, any human, and I think, oh, as much as I feel I'm the center of the universe, God's loving this person as much as me.
It's humbling, isn't it?
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Each and every one on the block. Everyone here, every store, every person. And Jonah doesn't get that until God gives it to him.
Right. Right, until God gives it to him and takes it away from him.
Right. So in other words, to give him what he's also taken away the shade that people, like Jonah should be shading people. That's what tshuva is. He should be giving people a place as a refuge, right, as solace, as a place to land. And instead, he wants to die because he's hot.
He's too hot, right? Yeah.
Too much.
You know what's amazing about this story is that it's the perfect bridge between Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. It's like Rosh Hashanah is the harsh light of judgment, right? It's Yom Hadin. Today is the day of forgiveness when we're a little, right, destabilized because maybe God is saying, well, the world doesn't work that way. You don't have to get punished for your sins the way you thought you did. And then we go into Sukkot, which is all about shade and blessing and sort of having a theologically uncertain world, because when we have theological certainty, we end up blaming each other. So that kind of softening, right? The returning to the dove.
And so we're going to come in for landing here, but I was going to say is that it reminds me of the Amichai poem, Yehuda Amichai, who says, "B'makom she'anachnu tzodkim," in the place where we're right, nothing blooms. And you give us an image here of Jonah, who is Mr. Truth, who needs to cut his truth a little bit with the humility that comes with the perspective that God has to care for, like care and concern is what we need more of in the world. We need justice, we need truth. But if we were to live in that harsh sun of truth for too long, we'd get burned.
Yeah.
And we need the shade that is provided by, I was wrong, and God says, okay.
And living with that fragility,
And living
right?
with that fragility.
Of the sukkah. Okay.